Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Hello, it's Angie Yingst, or Angie Yingst. I go by Angie Yingst in my regular life. And this is just a really brief intro to say that this is a long one. It's a little different. I haven't really posted a podcast since December. And that has been by design because I have stopped my business and I wanted a break from everything that was quote unquote work related or work adjacent. So part of that was this podcast. I am planning on publishing a couple of podcasts coming out in the next few months, and hoping to have some more really good conversations, particularly around some of the stuff I've been facing and studying and all of that stuff. This is basically a series of essays that I wrote. They were designed as letters to my clients and my students and my friends and my colleagues and all of that. And so they have different distinct personalities. I put some music in between them just to kind of break them up a little bit. Some are 5 minutes long, some are 20 minutes long, a little longer, a little shorter. So I hope you connect. I hope that it resonates with you. And, I don't know how it will be received. But please, I am open to talking. And so my email is Angie@themoonandstone.com. And I do use that email still. I try to check it. I know I've missed emails. So if there's something that you've needed, please feel free to reach out again. I have been really just not going to my computer. I've been unable to work because of pain, carpal tunnel. I just had surgery. So one thing I do say in this is, I am opening my book in the next week or two for one-on-one clients again, both tarot and online healing. So it will be distance. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I know it's going to reflect some of the stuff that I talk about in this podcast. So just if you don't subscribe to my newsletter, do that. I mean, I haven't written anything in my newsletter. So if you're not subscribed, you haven't missed anything recently, but I will be letting you know what's going on. Of course, my phone bings while I'm talking, but I will be posting stuff there so that you can be up to date on things. I will also be posting a ton of new stuff in my shop. I've had a lot of stuff that was at AltaView. We kind of moved that. I've put it, packed it away, but I'm going to pull it out again and start selling some stuff. So please check if you're interested in tarot stuff and crystals and things like that, there's going to be more for sale on my website at themoonandstone.com. So anyway, thanks for listening. Enjoy. Dearest, most precious you, this is a letter that I've been trying to write to all of you for many months, and I just really didn't know what to say. And at this point, I thought, I'm just going to record it and put it up as a podcast. So I have been serving my community as a healer and a tarot reader for a decade, 10 years, and it's been so rewarding and life-giving. And I say that with all the sincerity that I have, and that's authentically how I feel. And in the same breath, I have to say that I've been so tired and drained and spent, and I felt like an empty vessel. And most days, my goal was to be the empty vessel, the hollow bone through which spirit could blow wisdom and healing, Reiki, honesty, truth, healing. But to empty oneself is really difficult, and it requires a detachment that I do not think I'm able to easily sustain. I can do it, but I attach. I attach myself to my students, my clients, to my work, to my classes and research and writing, and I feel them. I feel them through me. I channel it through my heart, and I aim for loving detachment, y'all, but I love my people, even the most unlovable of them. Even the ones that drive me nuts, I love and care about and give a shit about. And I care about whether they succeed or not, whether I've caused harm or not, because I'm human. But the emptying felt more like my vessel wasn't consciously being emptied in the way that I do for a session, let's say, but that my vessel had a hairline crack that came from many years before I even started healing work. The years of caregiving for my father, or having babies, or grief and loss and trauma and, friend wounds and sister wounds and family wounds and then recovery. And those hairline cracks were not huge and I couldn't even see them. But part of them came just from being human, and humaning is hard, and it's hard to do and give of yourself. So slowly over time, the essence just seeped out, making stains around me. And I could see them coming, and I thought I was taking care of things. The healing path I've been on has been pretty arduous, and I've talked with countless healers about their own health and wellness. And I think this is really a topic I want to explore so much more, but so many of us have been through illness and autoimmune disorders. I mean, most of the women that I know who are healers also have autoimmune disorders. There's grief and loss and depression and fatigue and healer's fatigue. And the retort inevitably comes that this is sort of what's required of being a healer. Maybe it's our karma. Maybe we're just so empathetic, or all the things that we say. I think the work of being a healer has given me a really deep compassion and empathy. And I wonder about it, though. I wonder if it's fair to say that we must suffer to help others. Is it true that the spiritual path is all uphill, selfless, sacrificial? Or is that a way for us to be unduly burdened with a kind of puritanical workaholism that forces us into a joyless Sisyphean climb of giving and giving for the future promise of something holy? Meanwhile, our day-to-day is us suffering deeply and then thinking we deserve it. So I don't want to be political here, but late-stage capitalism chews people up and spits them out. And in this community, when we look at it, and when I say late-stage capitalism, I mean post-industrial capitalism that now commodifies everything, and we definitely see it in social media, right? It commodifies the person. But when you're working with your spirit, when your spirituality and job are together, everything is sold and everything is sucked dry. And I think for me, I felt as though if I were as authentic as I could be, that health, wealth, and all those things would follow very easily. But, for me, health and wealth are peace of mind, love, kindness, compassion, and those are free for those who seek it. And they take space, and they take time, and they take removal of myself from the public eye, right? So I don't want to be political here, but late-stage capitalism chews people up and spits them out. And in this community, when we look at it, and when I say late-stage capitalism, I mean post-industrial capitalism that now commodifies everything, and we definitely see it in social media, right? It commodifies the person. But when you're working with your spirit, when your spirituality and job are together, everything is sold and everything is sucked dry. And I think for me, I felt as though if I were as authentic as I could be, that health, wealth, and all those things would follow very easily. But, for me, health and wealth are peace of mind, love, kindness, compassion, and those are free for those who seek it. And they take space, and they take time, and they take removal of myself from the public eye, right? So, I've always been smart, and I say that with humility, even though it sounds arrogant, because, for me, humility is walking this path with knowledge of both your strengths and weaknesses. And I'm smart. I'm street smart. I'm book smart. I'm logic smart. I'm people smart. Smart is my strength. I'm also like responsible and creative and determined and motivated and hardworking and perfectionistic and obsessive and judgmental and self-abusive and self-reliant to a fault. My old Buddhist therapist once said, "You're a little more than capable," and that's not a compliment, which means like this is the rub, all of our assets, all those things that look positive that we get complimented for become things that cause our downfall, right? Our assets become our character defects, as we call them in recovery. And if you didn't know, I am an alcoholic with over 13 years of sobriety and a 12-step program. But I'm prone to numbing and dissociative behavior, and I work until I get recognition. I work until my fingers bleed, and I work to the detriment of my family, and I work till I drop. And last year I dropped. And a lot of people say, "Oh, workaholism. I'm a workaholic." No, you don't know. I think there is a dedication to work that's really positive. Someone who cares and who's dedicated. And then there's workaholism, where you work for months and months and months, from 3:30 a.m. until 10 p.m. You get 4 hours of sleep. I did that. I'm not proud of that. I'm deeply ashamed of that. One day last June, I was like at the end of my tarot class, and this is when I was working because I was refilming all my tarot classes and just getting so many insights. I mean, the creativity was just like it was just amazing, the kind of stuff that was coming that I wanted to share in that class. And I love that class. Love it. But I was working myself like hard, and I was doing a lot of bonus videos, and I was doing 2 live videos with the students and then answering questions and trying to also, like, my kids were like in all kinds of sports, and I'm driving everybody everywhere. And one day everybody was gone, and I was just like leaning against the doorway looking in the hallway. I think I was trying to figure something out. I don't even remember. I was like thinking about nothing and everything, and I had that like 100-yard stare where you're not really focused on anything. You're like kind of in the near, like you're not focused on the near, you're not focused on the far, and you're just kind of like there. And I was like swirling in thoughts and whatever. And then I shook it out and realized, like, when I started walking, that I had been there for an hour or more. I was totally dissociated, catatonic. And it scared me. No one was home to interrupt me. And I knew it was because I had been resting, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And I was like, am I going insane? Did I need a standing nap? I remember my dad telling me when he was in Vietnam, he was on a ship that got hit in Vietnam. Sunk. They call it sunk, but it doesn't go all the way down, right? It's filling up with water. And he said during that time when it got hit and they were getting shot at from the shore, that they were awake for 48 hours or something like that. And he said that he fell asleep standing up because he was so tired. And I always remember that because I was like, after that thing, I was like, am I like Dad, in Vietnam? And I was like, you're just working on something you love, Angie. So I shook out of that. And when I realized, like, oh, that's not good, I canceled all my summer appointments and classes. And then the next day I went back to my therapist. I called her and I said, I need to come back. Like, something's going on with me. So during my studies with Pixie Lighthorse and Soul Lodge Earth Medicine School, she suggested we read this book called Trauma Stewardship. It's a book by Connie Burke and Laura Van Der Noot Lipsky. I'm reading her name, and I should have practiced before I said it. I mean, I've read this book. It is so good, people. Oh my God. it is a wonderful exploration on exactly what I'm talking about, which is burnout. And the way we burn out is different when we're caring for people. Now, she's a nurse, and so nurses and doctors have a different, like, secondary trauma when they see people in pain, when they see people like ER nurses, you know, they burn out quickly because they're holding space for others and they're seeing things that you shouldn't see, right? I shouldn't say you shouldn't see it. I mean, anybody can see it, but I mean, the idea that, like, when we see people in deep, deep suffering, when we see the body dying, you know, those things take time. Her first anecdote in the book is her going hiking with her extended family. And they got to the top of this, like, cliff, basically. They climbed all day. And the first thing she said was, I wonder how they would get search and rescue up here. And her father-in-law said, there's something wrong with you. Like, this is a beautiful view. And the first thing you're thinking about is how to get out. You know, if somebody was in an emergency. And that hypervigilance is something that we often think, like, oh, that's just part of who I am. But a lot of it comes from burnout, and it comes from trauma that is unprocessed. And, you know, holding space is a profession that impacts our psyche. And some people are like, oh, you're just, like, doing healing work. You know what? People release a lot, and it is amazing to behold. And it is the gift of being able to hold space for others, to allow them a safe space to do that. They're processing, they're crying, they're telling you things they haven't told other people, which is a great privilege. And on the other hand, we try not to take those stories into our daily life. But do we? Do we internalize them? I don't know. You know, despite teaching ethics and boundaries and talking about this, I mean, I've literally been talking about this for I don't know how many years, and I encourage my students to find space to honor their need for rest and recuperation. I was burning out and also not following my own damn advice. And it was actually a post by Annie Adamson. She's the founder of Primal Vinyasa. She's also like a business coach and consultant and an herbalist, and she's got all these things, and she has a nice social media presence. But she wrote this thing, and I may have told the story before, so I'm telling it again, but she wrote, it was like an Instagram post that said, I would never hire a coach who doesn't prioritize their mental, physical, and spiritual health. And she put red flags. Okay, and you're going to love this. It says, working overtime, not moving their body, skipping meals, not taking time off, ungrounded, overcaffeinated. And then she wrote, looking for a good coach can be a daunting task. They could have all the skills and the best intentions, but if they are not healthy, it will affect you and your results. And that more than gave me pause. I mean, I immediately had shame move through me like a fire, and all my cells were like hot and angry and red, and I wanted to unfollow her, and I wanted to write a nasty email back, because what a privilege it is to move your body. You know, like, as someone with arthritis and autoimmune disorders, like, gosh, I wish I could move my body. I can move my body. And I'm just saying that because I understand that. Who can just rest and take time off when you own your own business? That was a question I had. I felt defensive. I felt frustrated. And, you know, this isn't my first time that an Instagram post, like, hit me in the ego. You know, I didn't just fall off the turnip truck in the spiritual community. I get called out a lot on things that I do. And I, you know, sometimes, like, think it's worth it or not. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Annie. So I basically stopped the defensiveness and I said, okay, Angie, strong emotions, particularly anger, are usually a clue that something's going on here. You know, if it's hysterical, it's historical. And so I started going like, all right, what do I need to pay attention to? And then my little internal hermit, I'm talking about the 9 of Tarot, then, you know, the major arcana hermit said, aha, there you are, read it again. Examine the shame. Where's the shame coming from? What's going on? Where do you feel it in your body? And, the truth is I wasn't feeling in my body because I wasn't in my body. I was in my head. I was in my spirit. We can talk about addiction, and we talk a lot about drugs and alcohol and those kind of things when we talk about addiction. But, there's other kinds of addiction. Work is and has been my latest addiction and my loudest addiction. And it's always been there. I'm going to talk more about that. But, I was doing all the things, all the red flags, waking up at 3:30, working until 10 p.m., not asking for help, not saying no, seeking approval for overworking. Like everyone that would listen, I'd be like, I work so much, but I was also trying to do all the things of self-care that I had been taught. When I was doing my shamanic training, she had us write self-care plans. She was giving us tools to do this. And my self-care plan was praying and meditating and pulling tarot cards and doing walks and offering up the names. I was singing up the names of nearly 100 people who needed healing. Every day I was meditating, pulling tarot cards, doing all those things that I associate with self-care and help, and were in my self-care plan, but they're also my job. And so I fell into this trap, my own trap, where I felt like this, like almost obsessive need to do all the things. Like self-care was a freaking competition. Like I was consuming it, exploiting it, thinking it absolved me of the need for rest and recuperation because I had labeled it self-care. But the truth was, when I read this post, the shame was there, that deep, familiar shame. The shame was there because my biggest fear is, one, that I wasn't healthy, and two, that I wasn't good for my clients, and that I was harming the people I vowed not to do harm to. And the truth is, what are my students learning and gaining from my exhaustion and overwork? What are they learning about healing? That healing has no boundaries, no limits, that you're supposed to give and give and give in the name of service to others, so much so that you lose yourself, that you can stand catatonic in a hallway and that's normal. Did I really believe that a healer needs to give so much to their clients that they drop? I was teaching them that they are the commodity. They are the thing that is bought and sold. Their spirit, their soul, their heart. And, I am not a commodity to exploit and make money off of. Unless I want it to be. But maybe we can just be of service, So how do you give enough of yourself and earn money? Because this isn't just a hobby for me. This is actually my career. It's money we need. And so I have to stop and say, how do you give just enough without giving all? I never learned that. I was modeled workaholism and codependency from both of my parents. My mother drank pots and pots of coffee and just cleaned and worked all week and made all the food and did all the cleaning and did all the stuff. And she would wake us up on Saturday morning at 7 a.m. running a vacuum in our bedroom, even though all I wanted to do was sleep in. And my father, worked 16-hour days, never taking sick days. I felt neglected as a child, but also incredibly guilty for wanting more of them because they worked their asses off to provide for us. And they were good, decent people. They were not abusive people. But that emotional neglect is something that just stays with you. And that's not what I want to pass on to my kids, right? Workaholism and codependency, both those addictions help you lose yourself. And they decimate your ego. And the spiritual community loves to beat up the ego. It says your ego is not your amigo, right? It demonizes anything that says, I need blank. My mentor Pixie has always told us, know what you need, ask for what you want. And I say that in my class. And I always try to attribute it to Pixie. It's Pixie, not me. But it has helped me so much as someone negating the ego through addictive behavior and codependency. I can only say losing touch with your ego is no bueno. It is no good. Your ego keeps you safe. Your ego says you deserve rest. Your ego says don't treat me like a servant. Your ego says, who do you think you are? I deserve justice, equity, kindness. Your ego can move you towards your goals, sharing, and honesty. When you totally eliminate your egoic connections, and I say this as someone who maybe I know Buddhism has a whole selflessness, let go of the ego thing, but the egoic connection to your own needs and wants is important. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a big head or be arrogant. It just means that you can focus on putting on your own oxygen mask. Work is something I'm good at. I'm a worker bee. I work. Tell me what to do, I will do it. I was once helping I want to call him my uncle. He was my ex-husband's uncle on his farm. And he said that he had these guys that were such good workers that he once said, put the canoe on the roof just to see if they would do it. And they did. And he said, would you question authority a little? But I'm like that. That's how I am. I mean, I laugh because I was like, oh, I would have done that too. When I left my first husband and moved home with my mom and stepdad, they had just moved into a new home and they allowed me to stay there to save up money to go back to school. And I would get home from working all day. I worked at this natural food place that I loved. And I'd get home, I was so tired, and my stepdad would be out working on the landscape. I'd go out with my boots on and say, how can I help? And he would say, pickaxe this whole bed. And it would be like yards and yards of bed. And I would just pickaxe. And I would be sweating, turning over the dirt. And I was dirty and exhausted. And it was so good because I just needed to sleep. I needed to get out of my head. I felt decimated by the end of my first marriage. And I really needed to work. And I was raised with an immigrant mother, and she comes from a third world country and is a family of 12. They had 2 bedrooms, and there were children, my mom's siblings, and then their children. She was raised in poverty, and her father was alcoholic, and he spent all that he made as a tailor on alcohol. He was a borracho, the one that was stumbling through the yards, and the kids would say to her, your drunk dad's walking down the street, spending all the money they had. So my mom would tell these stories about making a slingshot and killing the birds and then making a fire and eating the bird. That's how hungry she was as a child. And she emigrated here. She began working, and she just worked so hard to send money home to her family, and she always sends money home to her family. She has every month. And when the thing to understand about immigrants coming to this country is that the work is that they're just wanting to help, and sometimes the sacrifice is coming here. Now, my father was raised in poverty and neglect too, and he had an alcoholic mother, and his childhood, both my parents' childhood, were pretty marked by violence. And my parents are very peaceful people. They're not really violent at all. They don't raise their voices. They don't get outwardly angry. A lot of it's kind of passive aggressive anger. But my dad worked his ass off to get out of that Pennsylvania mining town. He joined the Navy, and he left. He went to Vietnam, and during my darkest days, I was homeless, couch surfing, very poor, not able to afford food at a time, for days at a time. I was living in near squats. They weren't quite squats because I paid somebody money, but I don't know if they were legal. They had fleas and punk rockers and all kinds of stuff. And, so I also experienced deep poverty, and that's something that doesn't leave you. Hunger doesn't leave you when you've had it. And, my parents, they they were going through their own stuff, which is why I didn't call them for money, because they didn't have it. And I certainly, did not go into healing to make money. But it's certainly a job I wouldn't be able to afford to do if I didn't have a second income with my father. Sorry. Oh my gosh. It's certainly a job I wouldn't be able to do if I didn't have a second income from my husband. It's something, I don't think we talk about enough, that, it's hard to start up a healing business, and not, it's actually very easy to start up a healing business. It's hard to make a successful healing business because, one, there's a lot of healers out there, and two, people don't spend money on healing like they would on a massage, for example, because a massage is something like that might get prescribed. You don't have all the other baggage that comes with healing work, right? Which some people are like really attached to. Like, I don't know if I believe in it. It doesn't feel like you're doing anything, those kind of things. I was very lucky because there aren't a ton of these kind of jobs, but I had a job for an online Crystal Healing Academy, which is probably how most people know me. That job was incredibly fulfilling. But it gave me, a modicum of reputation and renown in my field. People knew me a little bit more than they would if I just had started a business, right? Because we had thousands of students. And so, I would say that even with all that, I didn't always have a full book. And so I was teaching and filling in those holes in my schedule with teaching classes or writing books. I often would work really, really hard to sort of market myself and get out there, because those are things you have to do. So, when you think about owning your own business, it isn't just I'm just going to do the healing. You have to get people to understand what you do, who you are. And then, I always was called as a teacher, and that was a big deal for me. So, being a teacher is important. And so teaching was really a big deal. And I say that because the teaching kept me busy for a lot. And a lot of it is just an investment of time. You're not getting paid for those things. Okay. So when I talk about working, and I'm working from, 3:30 a.m. to 10 p.m., a lot of what I'm doing is creating memes for, or post for Instagram, and doing research for my classes, and writing the outlines for my classes, and filming my classes, and, or making podcasts, or doing, whatever I had to do. And then also I have 3 children. And so, I worked until my kids woke up. Then I made them breakfast, made them lunch, drove them to school, came back, worked for a couple more hours. Then I'd pick them up, drive them around to their things, make dinners, then go back to work. Sometimes I'd have a live class or something, but I didn't have backup. And I say that not accusatorily towards my husband, but he leaves for work before 6 o'clock and he gets home at 5. He is in the medical field, so he has a pretty important job of keeping people alive, and he gets burnt out too. And so, I didn't have this full book. And, my best friend, Sharon, she always says oh, it'll come when, your children are little, your spirit's giving you what you need. But I just always felt I'm just struggling to get normal. I just felt like I was always hustling. And so when I got the job at Hibiscus Moon Crystal Academy, that was so awesome for me, because it did fill in some of the financial stuff that I really needed. But I gave so much of myself to her business over the last decade, and I didn't really have time to focus a ton on my business. So as my mentor sort of talked publicly about boundaries and their commitment to self-care and waking late and not having too many meetings, and she would take sabbaticals, months off at a time. And I have to say, that's awesome. If you can do that, do that. But, there's also a whole team behind her doing the stuff that allows her the freedom to do that. And she pays us, and that's the exchange of energy. But, I'm working weekends. I'm waking early to get things done before my kids get up. I'm the one working on vacation because of the rules she's set up for her self-care. And I say this with no bitterness or resentment, but I do think that self-care, the way it can be described by some of these wellness influencers, it's really a myth that's created by people who can afford to have other people do the shit work for them. And self-care in the way that's taught, like you can manifest this time or you can manifest resting, it's a full-time job that most of us can't afford to do. So my time off of work this last 6 months has been a major sacrifice for our family. And it was made for my mental health and my physical health, but it's not sustainable for me. So, it's not like we're going to go on with one income. We can't do it. So, right now, self-care is my daily promise, my daily focus. But, I think like when I think about the self-care thing, it's a myth, And it's not that I don't practice self-care. I do right now. I can right now. But it is also hard. Like, I'm like, how am I still so busy? I'm a very organized person with like schedules and to-do lists and labels and color-coded everything. But there is not enough time to do all the things that some people think you should do for self-care. And I really began to feel alienated from this community of metaphysical healers and practitioners and wellness gurus because I feel like I'm different, I'm all the red flags. And part of the reason I'm all those red flags that Annie identifies because I'm not rich or self-supporting. And I was acting like it, I buy the latest gadgets. I spend money on crystals and healing tools. I adorn myself with beautiful clothing because I feel like I'm going to be in a public, on camera or whatever. But, I was flailing inside with all the chaos of having too many balls in the air and wanting to appear more together than I was. I was the upside down 2 of Pentacles. So, I also wonder, how are you all doing this? Am I the only one struggling so much with just existing? When 2023 came and Hibiscus Moon closed, I was determined just focus on my own business. I thought, oh, this will give me the space to do that. But I started a mile behind the start line, because I was at a pace at the end of Hibiscus Moon that was in a near constant work. I was grading and emailing, and I remember working very early on Christmas morning before my children woke up because I was so afraid I'd get behind on the 26th that I just wanted to do a little bit so I wouldn't have so much to do on the 26th. When I finally had that time, and that didn't come until February, where I could put everything into my business, and I tried to emulate the business that I had just come from, taking her brilliant marketing advice. I had a business coach, expanding my offerings. I was doing all of that alone. I came from a business that had a team of 8 people, and I'm doing it by myself. And people ask, how can I help? And I would say, I don't even know. I couldn't afford to hire anyone, nor did I have time to explain how to do things. I remember one time my sister said, I'll do this, I'll do that. And I said, great, here, I'll pay you this much. I could afford to pay her. I made a deadline that was very loosey-goosey. And she hadn't even opened the files after a month. And people were writing me angry emails. Where are these files? And I was like, shit, I just got to do it myself. Because I wasn't paying her enough to be able to be like, oh, that's going to be my priority. And I don't blame her. She has a full-time freaking job. But I basically festooned myself with all of Annie's red flags. I made a dress out of it. I was wearing a red flag dress, working overtime, becoming increasingly sedentary, skipping meals. I was living on mixed nuts, power bars, chocolate and coffee, not allowing myself weekends or days off, feeling totally ungrounded, over caffeinated. I couldn't even cry, I was just so busy. I just walked around in this fugue state with doing the next thing on my list. Something I don't talk a lot about is my father. He died in 2018. He was a workaholic, and he never called in sick. He never avoided hard labor. He had 3 jobs for a lot of my childhood. He would work in a warehouse. He would be a roofer. He would, work at a beer distributor. He would do whatever. And he kept that pace for a lot of my childhood. And, in the end, he ended up working in warehouses. He was a forklift driver, and then he worked his way into management. And then he eventually became the general manager of the largest frozen food warehouse in the country at the time. And now I don't know if it still is. I don't keep track, but he also was a huge drinker. So he was workaholic and alcoholic. And as my sponsor likes to point out, it sounds like your dad was the architect of your addictions. I was like, oh, yeah, maybe. He wasn't a violent or angry drunk. He was a depressed drunk. And he was a master of guilt and shame and sarcasm and finding that thing about yourself that you hate and then kind of making fun of it. So he was not my favorite person when I was growing up. I identified his alcoholism pretty early. I knew what it was when I had my first health class that talked about alcoholism. I remember thinking I should go to Alateen, and I never did. But when I became a teenager and his drinking really progressed, it progressed because my parents divorced, and he became, a full-blown fall-down blackout drunk. And he often said he had nothing to live for. So he quit his 6-figure job to kind of drink full-time. And as a teenager I was forced to go to his house, and then we began caring for him and picking him up and putting him into bed. And he would call me a lot drunk, and he would say, I'm going to kill myself. Or if I had the balls to do it, I would kill myself, but I'm a coward, I was 16, 17, 18. Then one day he did do that. He ran his car into a tree. He walked away with a couple scrapes. But, I had so much anger that I was forced to be parentified so fast. And I have a twin sister who also goes through pretty severe clinical depression. And when she was a teenager, she also was pretty suicidal. And then, of course, I was kind of a punk rocker, emo kind of goth kid. And so all the kids I was around were depressed, suicidal, goth kids. And my ex-husband used to call me the suicide hotline. And it was because people would call me and just tell me all the awful things that they felt. And I always answered the call. When my sister was depressed and attempting suicide and stuff, we hid that. The two of us did. It was a thing that we felt our parents would overreact to, as well they should. As a parent of a 17-year-old, I'm like, as well they should overreact. But I didn't understand the gravity of what I was holding alone. And I remember when my mom found out, I was already out of the house, but she yelled at me because I had been keeping this secret. And I think about that sometimes because I've had sponsees keep secrets from me. Maybe they're sleeping with someone they shouldn't be sleeping with, or doing whatever, it's drinking. And when they tell me, I always say, thanks for trusting me, So my father, after he quit his job, I think he realized, I got to get a job. And he got job after job. He'd move to a job and then lose the job and rinse and repeat. And he did this until he literally dropped too. In the Irish side of my family, we talk about sports, we insult each other, and we talk about our pain. Oh, my bowels hurt, that was my great-grandmother, and my grandmother would be like, oh, my back, But when he was 42, he was diagnosed with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, and he couldn't work anymore. His body gave out, and he spent the next 26 years being a prisoner in his body, which betrayed him so profoundly, with paralysis, pain, incontinence, and the inability to swallow, which is what eventually killed him. And my sister and I would visit him weekly. We would take him food and laundry. I drove 3 hours each way on Saturday. And then eventually he moved closer, and it was only an hour and a half, and that was like huge. But my Latina mother reared me to care for men, specifically my father, to care for him, to resent him, to aid him, But I learned a lot taking care of my father. I thought he was kind of my spiritual quest, and I would work all week and be in a good mood, and then I would go take care of him on the weekend. I would go to my grandfather's, clean his house. I didn't have time for me, and when I began caring for him, I really didn't like him very much. I thought he was critical, sarcastic, unkind. I mean, when I got my bachelor's degree, the thing he said was, "So I guess you're one of those college assholes now," and I was like, "Yep." But I still went and did his laundry and cleaned for him and watched Red Dawn 1,000 times. But as time went on, my dad softened and changed, and his memory became elusive, and he was grateful and full of gratitude at his daughters. And he never, quite remembered my husband's name, but he would always say, "How's he doing?" And I would say, "Fine, Dad, he's a good man." He would say, "How is his new job?" And I would say, "He loves it," even though he'd been there for 5 years. And one day I realized, I had grown to really just have so much affection for my dad. I kissed his forehead and did Reiki on him a lot, and take him to lunch in his wheelchair. And, he wasn't as mean, and I think it was helpful. But, I realized his lesson, the thing that he gave me, was unconditional love. Did he deserve it? It didn't matter. He got it. And my sister and I were the only ones who really were with him. And nobody else came. I mean, he would have a visitor here and there. We had one of his best friend growing up's mother would come visit him, which I loved her. I love her so much. But I was released from anger and resentment. In the months before he died, he would call me 4 or 5 times a day and say very sweetly, "What am I supposed to be doing right now?" And I would say nothing. He's like, "I don't have to go to work?" And I would say, "No, you stopped working many years ago." He's like, and he said, "Why stop working?" It's like, "Because you got sick." He said, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" I said, "You're just supposed to enjoy your life and laugh and heal." He would say, "What? I don't know how to do that." But, he would say, "My memory ain't good no more, babes." And I would say, "That's okay. I love you. You can call me 15 times a day with the same question. I'll always tell you the truth." And when he died, it was just my sister and I and our families. My mom came, my cousin came, but it was really just less than 10 of us. And they did a 21 gun salute. And I thanked him, in those moments for teaching me unconditional love. And also being the architect of my addictions. When you walk into a 12-step meeting, people often say, "I am very grateful to be an alcoholic." And when I first came into recovery, I was like, what the hell? But I get it now. And if I hadn't hit the bottom that I hit, if I hadn't gone to a 12-step recovery program, I never would have recovered. And I never would have sought recovery. And recovery has given me the most in my life. I have a degree. I have all kinds of certifications. And the most that I've learned has been in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not supposed to reveal where I got sober, but y'all know already. So hopefully it's buried enough in this that I won't get in trouble or anything. But, I opened back up to my spirit. I formed a direct spiritual connection, which I had always been lacking. I have my degree in religion, so I would go to different churches and pray and mosques and synagogues and pray with different kinds of people. And I loved every religion. I can honestly say I think every religion is so beautiful. And I'd be in there with them, and I could never quite get to that point where I felt like my prayers were genuine, where I was honestly praying from my heart. And when I got into recovery, I began honestly just talking to Great Spirit, to God, to my higher power, whatever you want to call it. But I opened that connection up with my spirituality. and I began praying and talking to God. And I'm going to say God, but, I don't have a conception. Like, I don't have a vision of what God is. I just think of it as spirit. And I was raised Catholic, but I kind of feel like there's so much wisdom, like God just is, and how we interpret how to live is really, which way do you want to get there? You want to go the scenic route? You want to go the direct route? So, if I hadn't identified that I was an alcoholic, if I hadn't gotten sober, if I hadn't quit drinking, I never would have opened up to spirituality. And that meant I would never have opened up to my healing work. I probably would have never gone back to tarot. I would have never found a connection with myself. I would never have gone in for trauma work. I probably, I could see the way alcoholism was harming my life. And in this last 6 months of being off work, I can see the ways workaholism has destroyed my life. And I have hit a bottom. And I am at the bottom. And I'm ready to rebuild my life now. There is a great quote in the big book that says, "For years I was sure the worst thing that could happen to a nice guy like me would be that I would turn out to be alcoholic. And today I find it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And this proves I don't know what's good for me. And if I don't know what's good for me, then I don't know what's good or bad for you or anyone. So I'm better off if I don't give advice, don't figure out what's best, and just accept life on life's terms as it is today, especially my own life as it actually is." And I think that's where I am right now with workaholism. Like, I thought the worst thing that could happen was I would stop working. I would lose my business. I would blah, 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 blah. Insert it all. And today I find out it's the best thing to take those 6 months off, because I'm starting to learn to accept my life as it is, with its illnesses and limitations, and then the possibilities of healing and joy, and understanding what burnout looks like and feels like, and how I can rebuild a work life that is balanced. Part of why I wanted to talk to you is that so much happened behind the scenes that people knew about and also didn't know about. And so I'm going to tell you this quick story about when I was in my 20s. And again, I might have told this before. I was living in Tucson. I was working as a barista. I slowly became the general manager, co-general manager of this cafe. This was before Starbucks moved in. So it was one of the only cafes that were open early. And I used to work the morning shift. So I would get there at 5 a.m. to get the cafe open. And that was kind of our busiest shift. And I came in alone and I would start the whole process. So the entire cafe, when I walked in this one day, was covered with an inch of water. So I took off my shoes, I turned off the alarm, and I found out that the ice machine hose had come off the machine. And so I turned off the water there, and I got the mop, and I just started mopping. I would mop into a bucket, squeeze it out. So we had almost like this 1,800 square foot cafe. And here I am, I would mop, get it soaked, wring it out. Then I would dump the bucket. And, it just went on. It was insane. I felt like I was making no progress. Another person came in and I said, call the owner. I was like, oh, right. Okay. Yeah, let's call the owner. I guess I can't just clean this up by myself. And so I did that. And, he came in, he got a squeegee and just started pushing water out the door. We got somebody in there and we opened by 7:30. I think about that way more than I probably should, of me being alone in a cafe, near tears at the impossibility of what I was doing, feeling like I was failing, like the leaking ice machine was my fault, hoping that someone who I didn't call would come to help me. And so last year was me mopping up a flood of overwork, and not getting anywhere. And I wish you could say all these aha moments were totally profound, like all these little insights is what really stopped me from working in 2024. But really it was my own dang body saying, you ain't stopping, girl, we're going to make you stop. You are now my personal voodoo doll. Every time you do too much, I'm going to poke you. And so you're going to have this random violent pain until you rest your damn body. So, I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about what my body's been through on top of the overwork. So in 2021, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Now, I took off 6 weeks of work for a double mastectomy, and I had I went flat, meaning I didn't have reconstruction. So when you have reconstruction, you have to have a number of surgeries. When you go flat, you just have one surgery. And so I took off work, and I was cancer-free when my breast came out. So I was off for 6 weeks. At like week 4, I was asked to go to a work meeting, which basically added a level of stress and anxiety to my life that I can't even express. And it kept me up for nights, for months, for weeks, and derailed my healing. And I should have said no to that meeting. And I'm telling you that now, but I wanted to be a good employee and be dutiful, and I also didn't want to be difficult. So in the end, within 2 weeks of that, of course, I developed a massive, horrendous infection in my chest. And I say that like I woke up one day and it looked like I had boobs again. And they had to reopen my mastectomy wounds and basically drain them. And so for 3 months, I had open wounds in my chest. Now, this is something that I don't know if a lot of people know happens to other people who have massive surgeries, especially where they get a part of their body amputated. But, the infection that got in there had to be open so that it would drain, it wouldn't get stuck in and then move to a different part of my body. So I had these open wounds. Against my chest wall, I would have to stuff gauze every day. I'm saying 0 out of 10. I would not recommend that. But it was like the first time I did it, I threw up because it was so disconcerting, I think. So basically, I had a low-grade fever for 2 months. I was often just covered with sweat and fluid. I had to wear like pads, like for your period, menstrual pads, over my chest in a bra. Of course, I caught COVID in there. I led a, retreat. I did all kinds of stuff because I couldn't take off work, quote unquote, because I just took 6 weeks off. I couldn't take more time. I was so fatigued and so out of it, and I was still working. I was still just like a Energizer bunny, going. And I just was not feeling better. I developed like extreme anemia. And then I finally was like, all right, I went to the doctor. I'm like, I'm so exhausted. She's like, you are so extremely anemic right now. And she's like, I really want you to go to your gynecologist and get checked out. And I was like, because she had asked me, like, are you having your period? I was like, well, I think I'm going through menopause. I just have like such a heavy period right now. And she was like, that's not normal in menopause. You're not supposed to have your period. And I was like, well, I don't get it for a month. And then it comes really strong. And then I got diagnosed with something they call adenomyosis, which is like endometriosis in menopause, perimenopause. And, but they were like, well, at this point, maybe we should just consider taking your uterus. And she said, so I'm going to just do a biopsy of your uterus. And then maybe we'll consider doing a total hysterectomy since you're done having babies and blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right. And then, of course, that comes back as positive for endometrial cancer. So I have to have a total hysterectomy. I'm still working, by the way. So I am going through all this. I mean, this is like so many doctor's appointments to just get to this point. I went to a number of surgeons, one of which who said, oh, yes, of course you have cancer, you're fat. So I really think what you should have is, gastric bypass instead of a hysterectomy. I'm like, instead of, like, well, we can do one and then we can do the other. But that's really the prescription I'm giving you, is to have gastric bypass surgery. I was like, what the hell, dude? I went to another surgeon, but it stuck with me. It was just like, oh, you are not talking to me about my cancer at all. You're just telling me I'm too fat and that I'm always going to have cancer. It turns out I have like a genetic predisposition to certain cancers at any rate. So, I'm still working. I'm telling you all this because this is like 2021, 2022. I mean, I was working during this whole time, I mean, I took some time off from my hysterectomy, like 2-3 weeks. I felt really good after that, but our vacation was in August. I was told I couldn't take off on vacation, so I had to work during my vacation while I was recovering from a hysterectomy. That was when I really was like, I have to quit, my job and focus on my healing. I thought it was completely unjust. I also thought this is what I have to do, to work less and rest is to quit. But to be honest, I really believed in what I was doing. I loved what I was doing. It was a calling, and I felt that way. And not only was it really busy, I could not leave my coworkers without an extra set of hands. I mean, I honestly cared less about the rules and more about like they're going to be so overwhelmed. So, here I am going into full menopause and not allowed to take hormones because I have hormone receptive breast cancer. I had 2 cancers in a year, and I just felt like I was being punished. And I kept thinking, why do I have all this? And, I would do all these meditations and kind of come to this conclusion like, oh, this is the end of my healing, because I've been on such an intense healing journey. I mean, I lost a child. I've got sober. I've been, just so many things. I'm just like, when does the suffering stop for someone like me? Like, when do I get to rest? And, when I finally moved into 2023 and started working on my own business, in June, right when I had that kind of catatonic state, I started getting this massive pain in my hands, like neuropathy from arthritis. And I've had neuropathy before. I took a medication that caused neuropathy that never went away, and it was terrible. And now I'm like, my hands are completely numb. I can't use them. I can't do artwork. I can't draw. I can't write with a pen. Just all the typing and PowerPointing. Like when I finally went in and I got like they call it an EEG, like an EKG, but for your nerves. I forget what it's called. I got electrophysio, which was, oh my God, so painful, dude. So painful. But, I had carpal tunnel syndrome in both my hands. My shoulder pain was from being, a fast pitch softball pitcher for most of my childhood. Hello, freaking osteoarthritis, you asshole. And then, I had a rotator cuff injury, that like got really aggravated by trying to get comfortable with sleeping and the extra weight that I have. So like I had so much pain. I can't even tell you. It was like, I couldn't get comfortable. I still had that neuropathy and restless leg syndrome in my feet and ankles. And then I had my hands waking me up every 2 hours completely on fire. And I know bitching about pain is about as interesting as watching someone mop up water in a cafe at 5 a.m. But I can just say that at the end of 2023, it wasn't that I didn't want to work anymore. It's that I couldn't work anymore. My vessel was fully broken, empty, in a puddle of me. I wasn't sleeping well. I had to learn how to rest. And I can say now, I'm not good at it. I know I needed to heal, and I needed to not use my hands repetitively over and over again, but I also needed to step away from the feeling of not being or doing enough. And, caring for our 2 teenagers and our 9-year-old and dogs and husband and 4 acres of land and a house, I had to kind of focus on one or the other. And so we talked about it, and I decided to not work. And I thought I'd be spending my time on my business. I thought I would be spending time, not like working on my business. I thought I would replace that with like these spiritual quests, like daily tarot, hour-long meditations, shamanic journeying, walking in the woods. I did not do that. I watched Law and Order SVU. I swam in my little swim spa. I ate well. I also ate like crap because now a sugar addiction kind of came over. I learned how to do stained glass. I watched every volleyball game my 14-year-old play while screaming my heart out, and every basketball game my 9-year-old play. I played a lot of rummy and cribbage with my kids. I've organized every closet, cabinet, garage, basement, nook, cranny of my house. I volunteered countless hours to women in recovery. I went back to therapy. And most importantly, I have reckoned with my workaholism. And I'm still reckoning with my horrendously destructive workaholism that I have, and I continue to confront. So even in my volunteer position, I can get workaholic. And people throw that around casually as a point of pride. I'm workaholic, but I think hopefully, part of the reason I'm telling my story is so that you understand how destructive it is and how I was honestly praised every day for my workaholism. And it is deadly for me. It is going to take away my intimate relationships. I lost part of my spirit, and I lost part of me. And I had to take this 6 months off to figure out who I was and to really enjoy myself. I continue to be deeply, deeply ashamed of the instinct I have to numb and avoid through work and alcohol and food and whatever. And I continue trying to improve, but I can't seem to get on top of it. The trauma, which kind of started young in my life, continued through my teens, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, some of which I've shared, some of which I haven't, but the trauma kind of caught up with me in 2023. And a lot of this trauma is the trauma of my body and my relationship with illness. Through the last 18 years since I had my first pregnancy, I felt like my body has turned against me, just like my father. I've always had skin diseases. I had psoriasis as a child. I had dihydrotic eczema. I have hidradenitis suppurativa. And after children, I really couldn't lose weight. So pain began in many forms, like aching, inability to use my joints. And ultimately, I was diagnosed with so many autoimmune disorders. It's shameful to be a healer and to be in chronic pain, to be a healer, to be fat, to be underslept, to be underfed, ultimately to be sick. Those red flags that Annie had, so many of them are like, these are my symptoms of being sick, and they came before the healing, right? So, and they're still here. But sobriety and my spiritual path gave me a lot of healing. And one of them is to be able to name things, I understood and I understand the connection between my father's workaholism and his illness. And sometimes we have to tell that story. And, my story is, in my family, we work so hard. We don't stop working. We pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and get ourselves out of poverty. We emigrate to places for opportunity, and we send money to those who cannot work. And we cannot stop working or we'll be in poverty and we're not able to eat. And then, as we go through the healing, we tell a different story. In my family, we work so hard that we make ourselves chronically ill and cannot move our bodies. Our bodies give up because we need rest. And I'm telling you this because this is the work I do for myself. And I've been thinking about it. This week Thursday, a couple days ago, I had surgery on my hands for carpal tunnel, which is incredibly exciting for me because there is an end to the pain. I mean, I can already move my hands. The numbness is gone. The pain, is different. And I hope I can play guitar again and type up words and write and do more art. Stained glass has been difficult with this pain. So, I want to do things differently, and I have been planning on doing things differently, to be balanced, to find a happy medium, to be moderate, to talk about my addiction to workaholism, my addiction to work, my workaholism. But to be frank, I am still learning, and I'm dealing with shame, and I'm dealing with self-loathing because of that. I really want to work with my clients again and to teach you and to pass on what I have. But I will always be, a wounded healer. And I want you to know that I'm never going to hide the fact that I'm wounded and that I have my own shit that I'm working on. And, it wasn't until 2024 that I began to honor me. And we don't talk about a lot of things in the spiritual community that can be hard. Like how hard self-care can be, how much spiritual bypassing we can do, how dismissive our friends in the spiritual community can be to our real lived pain. That sometimes the pain just comes from nowhere. Sometimes it comes from the very thing that we think is saving us, like work. like spirituality. I am unwinding the deep trauma that I carry, but also the self-loathing that I carry. I never would have said 2 years ago that I hate myself. I would have been afraid to say that out loud. But I have done that. I am continuing to do that work. And it is work. I didn't understand that overwork was self-abuse. And that self-loathing is a thing that feeds overwork. That my worth, my being depended on whether you thought I was working hard or not, or whether I was doing enough. Working hard enough is different than feeling enough, So, as often is said, this is teachings from my own teacher, is like you have to name it to tame it and you have to feel it to heal it. And it's lonely to hate yourself. And it's hard to say that I've read so many books, studied with so many teachers, literally done therapy for 10 continuous years, and I'm only starting to understand the depth of my self-loathing. That's rough. It's embarrassing. But you might be thinking, like, how are you healing it right now? And I'm just going to say, I named it, and now I'm starting to feel it, to understand where it comes from. The trauma, the perfectionism, the criticism that I've understood. One of my favorite Instagram accounts is Reductress, which is a feminist satire account, and they have headlines and stock pictures, and it's very funny. And it never really fails to make me laugh. It is so poignant for me. And one of them that I really love is this: mom who spent 25 years trying to change you doesn't understand why you're not more confident. And I'm not saying that about my mom in particular, but like it rung really true to me. Like I grew up in a family that's like, it was always, here's the 98% I got on my spelling test. Well, where are the other 2 points? Yeah, I mean, that's how I grew up. So, I am confident in my ability to work hard and do things, but I am not confident in loving myself. And so that's what I'm learning. I have given perfectionism up, and I don't fall into that trap too much, but the loathing still is there for me not being perfect. And so, did I give perfectionism up? Well, I don't get stuck in trying to be perfect, but I get stuck in saying, that isn't really that good. You shouldn't put that out there. You shouldn't do that thing. You didn't love her enough. You didn't do that enough. You didn't say the right thing. You didn't do the right thing, blah, 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 blah. So I'm learning to love the imperfect me. I tolerate her right now, but I've been working on loving her and laughing at her and with her, being friends with her, and finally just, integrating her and being her. I'm not tolerating self-abuse. And long ago, I stopped talking to myself like Bobby Knight. I always called my inner voice Bobby Knight because it was like the infamous Indiana basketball coach throwing chairs at my psyche until I broke. And I used to think I really need that self-abuse to get there. I really need to say, like, you're an idiot. You got to get it together. And I still talk like that to myself, and I have to catch myself and stop it. So if you hear me, you're allowed to catch me. I'm no longer willing to abuse myself through overwork, through overeating, through alcohol, through complaining, through self-sabotage, through deference to other people's needs. Whatever comes up on the self-loathing behavior playlist that I'm always listening to. But I'm learning to live without alcoholism and burnout, and to have a balanced life, and to prioritize what matters to me. My babies, my animals, my partner, my home, my plants, my garden, my body. Where I'm not telling you to practice self-care where I'm sleeping 4 hours a night. I want to perform healing on you when I'm ready to heal me, which I think, I've been there. The last 6 months have been really healing. And all of that is to say, I am actually ready to go back to doing tarot and healing work and teaching. I am recovering from surgery, but I am going to open my book pretty soon. I will send out an email for that because I miss the connection. And if you're willing to have a wounded healer, I'm willing to heal. And, my book is going to reflect my self-care needs. And I'm hoping I can make enough money to help, our family financially, because having one income actually has been pretty difficult for us. We have been working through our savings. But, I want to be present with my family, with self-care. I have thought that this year would be me writing my book, and I haven't been writing. But I do want to get back to writing my books and continuing conversations on this platform which will mostly center around this very topic. As I heal, maybe I can help others. Maybe I can have conversations. I have a conversation with one of my best friends about being a single woman and trying to find a handyman. And it is a profound conversation that I have had in the vault since like November, I think, or October. I don't even know when we did that, but it's been a while, and I feel so bad that I haven't put it up, but I just felt like I had to turn everything off in my work because otherwise I would fall into that trap. I've been working in a very intense position as a volunteer and a board member with a women's recovery house. So I've been working a lot doing that and helping as much as I can. And again, like I always feel like I'm not doing enough there, but I'm also going through training right now as a certified recovery specialist, which is someone who sits with people who are ready to look at addictions in their life. So I'll be offering some recovery coaching appointments very soon, sober coach. And that'll be on my list of things. And, I haven't been sitting on my ass, but I feel like I need to still. And I have a deep shame about that. And this is really part of what I want to say. I'm sorry for not caring for myself when I cared for you. If I caused harm, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you about that and to understand the depth of how I may have caused harm to you. But remember this, and I say this in my heart of hearts. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I thank you and I love you. Those words, of course, are not mine. They're the Ho'oponopono, which is that ancient Hawaiian practice of love, forgiveness, repentance, and gratitude. I'll say it again. I'd like to end with it. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I thank you and I love you.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.